Keto does not cure type 2 diabetes. People need to understand this. Yes, keto can manage symptoms. It can improve markers of diabetes management. It doesn't cure it because the underlying cause is this insulin resistance, and ketogenic diets do not improve insulin resistance.
Drew is an exercise physiologist, a sports scientist, and a diabetes educator. He started the brand Drew's Daily Dose, which empowers people to thrive with diabetes rather than just simply live with it. Tell us about your diagnosis with type 1 diabetes at age 22 and how it changed the course of your life.
It's a death sentence. It was a huge wake-up call. When I was doing keto, that would spike my blood glucose, just a salad.
And this is because of the fat.
This is because there was so much saturated fat that my glucose tolerance was diminished. I went from keto to a plant-based diet. My insulin requirements started to come down very fast. On keto, 1 unit would give me like 3 grams of carbohydrate. On a plant-based diet, 1 unit I can eat 25 grams of carbohydrate.
Let's talk about exercise and diet and how it affects the diabetic.
All people with diabetes.
We are so close to a big win for the cows. The fiscal act will soon end the 80-year-old cow's milk mandate and pave the way for a fairer food system that honors choice for all kids. Millions of cows are producing milk that is being mandated onto lunch trays in schools across the nation. Along with the canned corn and soggy French fries, millions of unopened milk cartons are being tossed into giant trash bins when the cafeteria lunch bell sounds. And that is all about to change. Introducing the Justice Tour. This is an exciting new education initiative that will enlighten middle and high school students on how a dairy-free lifestyle supports health, compassion, and human performance. Policy change has merely paved the way for us. It will take dedication to drive real change. And that's why we're hitting the road in 2026. We plan to bring powerful, science-based education about health, performance, and dietary justice to school dietitians, district leaders, students, teachers, and parents nationwide. And your continued faith in us fuels our movement toward a future where every child can thrive without dairy and cows are spared unnecessary suffering. We want you to learn more about the Justice Tour and why we're taking this life-changing message on the road in a very cool, brand new VW ID bus. It's totally electric. Let's map a future where free choice for kids means freedom for cows. Go to switchforgood.org/justice-tour. We'll be sharing more details, but we want you to help us blast off in 2026 with this nationwide tour with a generous year-end donation. Help us build gratitude, help us build momentum, help us change the future for kids and cows. The power is in our hands. Go to switchforgood.org and make your generous year-end donation now.
I'm here with a great guest, though, so I'm not alone. And I'm very, very pleased to welcome Drew Harrisberg to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So good to have you, too. So Drew is an exercise physiologist, a sports scientist, and a diabetes educator living in Australia, on the beach in Australia, judging from his very popular Instagram account. Drew was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 22. He started the brand Drew's Daily Dose, which empowers people to thrive with diabetes rather than just simply live with it. He focuses not just on health, but also happiness and purpose, whether you're living with diabetes or not. He has an excellent TED Talk about how adversity can help you be more of the person you are and give you the opportunity to see where you need to grow. As an all-around athlete, he was a formidable contestant on Australian Ninja Warrior. But he has captured my respect because he does daily ocean swims in numbingly cold water. He is also a singer-songwriter with content available for us all to download from iTunes, with more to come. I'm also very touched by his beautiful relationship with his rescue dog, Dennis, so we'll be sure to learn about that too. Welcome, Drew, to the Switch for Good podcast.
Thank you so much. Wow, what an intro. When you put it that way, I've done a couple of things. Sounds pretty good.
You sure have. We do a lot of research on this show, and I really, really enjoyed researting you. It made me happy.
I can tell you. Some of the things you said there surprised me. I was like, did I do that? Ninja Warrior. Yeah. That was good.
Well, we're going to talk more about your personal story, but can we start first with something very concrete? Can you please explain what type 1 diabetes is and how it differs from type 2 diabetes? And while you're at it, will you explain the term insulin resistance? Because I'm sure it's going to come up. It gets thrown around a lot, and I feel like a lot of people don't really know what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. Great place to start. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease, which basically means that the immune system of the person attacks and destroys the cells of the pancreas that produce insulin. So when you have type 1 diabetes, you cannot produce insulin at all, and you have to rely on exogenous or outside of the body sources of insulin, which you can administer through a needle or a pen, or a pump, which is like a device that you wear 24/7, which can sort of drip feed insulin all day long. Type 2 diabetes is very different, although the symptoms are often the same. The pathogenesis, or the way that it actually occurs, is very different. So type 2 is not autoimmune. So the pancreas still can produce insulin, at least in the early days, but eventually the person might end up relying on taking exogenous insulin as well. And what happens with type 2 is the person becomes insulin resistant. So the insulin that they do produce stops working. And the role of insulin is to essentially allow glucose from the bloodstream to get into the cells of the body, into the muscles and the liver. Now, when insulin doesn't work properly, it's like having, I've heard other doctors use this analogy, but it's like having chewing gum in a lock. So insulin's the key, and you kind of just can't unlock that door to allow the glucose to enter the cells of the body. So the thing that makes it confusing for a lot of people is that the symptoms are actually the same. So high blood glucose, that's the main symptom of living with undiagnosed type 1 or type 2 diabetes. I think that's where people sort of get confused, because it sounds like an umbrella term, but the way that the disease manifests are very, very different. So the thing about insulin resistance, and this is what you just mentioned, is you'll see a lot of people in the blogosphere and in social media talking about ways to reverse insulin resistance with certain sort of dietary approaches, which they actually aren't reversing insulin resistance. What they're doing is, and I'll go into this, I'm sure, in a bit more detail later, but when you go, say, on a low carb or a ketogenic approach, what happens is you actually reduce the requirement for your body to produce insulin, or if you have diabetes like myself, you reduce your requirement to administer insulin, and you can achieve good blood glucose levels, but your actual sensitivity to insulin not only probably hasn't changed, but may even worsen when you remove carbohydrates from the body. So it's a term that needs a lot of more explanation, but in a nutshell, that's sort of the surface level.
So it means that the body doesn't hear the insulin or react to the insulin in your bloodstream. And so the body keeps pushing more and more insulin into the blood. That's and right. No glucose gets into the muscles.
Essentially. So the main cause of insulin resistance is gaining body fat, not just body weight and subcutaneous body fat, but fat that's called ectopic fat, which is essentially fat builds up in cells in the body where it shouldn't be. So in the liver, in the muscle cells, that kind of fat is what interferes with the signaling of insulin. So if you're eating a very high saturated fat diet, or over time you gain a lot of body fat, you can cause this state of insulin resistance. So the pancreas then has to work extra hard to produce the insulin, to pump it out into the bloodstream, and then try to get that glucose from the bloodstream into the cells, but the doors are locked and it just can't get the job done. So over time, it just works harder and harder and harder, and eventually it can burn out and you stop producing insulin. Then you're in a pretty tricky place, because now you've got insulin resistance and you're not making enough to do the job. So you have to then administer exogenous insulin. So it's really this double-edged sword, which over time can get worse, but there are some great solutions, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yes, we will. So for you as a type 1 diabetic, you don't have the fat issue, but you need to administer insulin many times a day.
That's right. I don't have the issue of insulin resistance, but I'm not immune to it. That's just the interesting thing, is that everyone can be susceptible. So if I did eat a diet that was very high in saturated fat, excess calories, and I gained a lot of weight, and I did get this ectopic fat buildup in the liver and muscle, then I could be an insulin resistant type 1 diabetic. So it's not like I never have to worry about it. That's why I'm so, on my exercise program and my diet, but it can also occur in everybody, in people without diabetes. You can develop insulin resistance over time. So it's something that I'm aware of, although I highly doubt I'll run into the issue in my life, because I'm so obsessed with sort of keeping this lifestyle in check. But it is something that could happen if I let go.
Injecting more insulin into your body is unhealthy.
Yeah, I mean, there's there's sort of a normal physiological range that we want to have. And having hyperinsulinemia or excess insulin, yeah, I mean, it's unhealthy, but it's also a sign that metabolically something is wrong with the system. It's almost like an indicator that if you need to produce that much insulin, or if someone with type 1 is giving huge doses, it's an indicator that your insulin sensitivity is not where it should be. And there are a number of things you can do to improve your insulin sensitivity. And that actually is one of the keys to good diabetes management, is how sensitive you are to insulin. Because you can have great blood glucose taking a lot of insulin. And I see this a lot in clients that I've worked with. They're sedentary, they may not exercise much, but their blood glucose control is fantastic because they're on a pump. So it just makes sure that they're always in range, which is great, but their sensitivity to insulin is actually not good at all. And that's another thing that you want to sort of work on when you have diabetes.
Tell us about your diagnosis with type 1 diabetes at age 22 and how it changed the course of your life.
So I finished university. I just got my degree. I was an exercise physiologist. I had a really great sort of childhood and high school years. Life was just too good to be true. And I got to a point in my life where I was trying to figure out what to do next. And I had this degree and I was just in the final stages of doing some work experience at a hospital, at a cardiac rehab facility, trying to get a job there as an exercise physiologist. I was sitting face to face with the head of the physiology department and I fell asleep in an interview, which was, I laugh about it now, but actually it's not funny at all. I just can't believe it happened. It was like you and I right now, we're sitting, looking at each other, and then I just start dozing off. And yeah, I sort of finished that interview and I got into my car and I was talking to myself thinking, what just happened? I cannot believe I fell asleep. That same day I was driving home and I fell asleep driving. And I was like, okay, something's seriously wrong. I spoke to my parents and I said, there's something wrong. I'm falling asleep. I can't keep my eyes open. I was also waking up every night in the lead up to that, needing to go to the bathroom, to urinate. I was thirsty, drinking a lot of water, always hungry, losing weight. So there were these signs that were sort of like adding up. The straw that broke the camel's back was obviously falling asleep driving a car. I mean, that's not something anyone wants to experience. So long story short, I went for a blood test and almost immediately there were a couple of results that came back that was pointing in the direction of type 1 diabetes. And we knew then that it was on the radar, but I hadn't yet been diagnosed and I only figured this out later, my lifestyle that I was leading at the point when I was getting the blood results was keeping me out of this diagnosis. So the daily exercise and the, being on top of my diet was actually sort of preventing me from developing diabetes as quick as I might have if I hadn't been on that sort of lifestyle, which was really interesting. So my dad, who is an eye doctor, and he works with people with diabetes his whole career. That was his thing. He was a diabetic eye sort of specialist. He still is.
And a lot of diabetics, if they don't take care of their diabetes, the eyes are affected because I did read that it has something to do with no glucose uptake receptor there or something.
Yeah. So the eyes, the nerves, usually of the extremities, the feet, and the kidneys are the sort of the organs that go. They're the ones that get it sort of almost attacked by having long-term high blood glucose if it's uncontrolled. So you see a lot of people with diabetes having this retinopathy where they basically eventually go blind. Kidney failure, limb amputation. It's like the long-term issues are very scary. So my dad was helping people with retinopathy for many, many years, and he worked with the diabetes clinic. So he sent me straight to the diabetes clinic and said, look, here's the blood result my son got. Can you check him, make sure everything's okay? And he was with me on that day. So I'm sitting down in an office with a diabetes educator, and she sort of pricks my finger to check what my blood glucose is, just to make sure that I was in range. And when she did the test, I could see immediately that she was just overcome with sort of shock and fear. And the number on the meter was about 5 times what it should have been. So it should have been about a 4 or 5, and it was 16. So I was diagnosed in the clinic that my dad had worked at for 20 years, sitting next to him in this crazy circumstance. Who would have thought that I would ever be in there with him? And that was the day of my diagnosis. So it was dark, very dark. One of the hardest, to this day, one of the hardest moments ever to deal with, especially with your dad there. And then having to go home and tell your mom the news. And, when you're first diagnosed, you're told about the short-term and long-term complications of diabetes. And when you hear those things on day one, you just think your life's over. It's just, that's it. It's a death sentence. But thankfully it was not a death sentence. It was a huge wake-up call. Not that I caused it myself, but a wake-up call to just take responsibility from now on and enjoy every moment. And that's what's happened.
Why do you think you got diabetes?
Good question. That was the first question that I asked the diabetes educator. And her response was, she sort of just threw her hands in the air and goes, we don't know why it happens. I think, having done some research after, there's a perfect storm. And this is quite well documented in the literature. There's a perfect storm of variables that happen sort of all at once or in a short time frame. Number one, you've got a predisposition, some kind of genetic predisposition to diabetes. Although I have no family history of it, there must have been some genes there that were predisposing me to eventually get it. Number two, there are viruses and bacteria that are associated with developing it. So you may get a virus that triggers the immune system. So in an attempt to get rid of the virus, the immune system can accidentally destroy the cells of the pancreas that produce insulin. It's like a molecular mimicry. You can also have environmental triggers that do that same process. Although this is more controversial and I wouldn't sort of stand by this altogether, but it is interesting to at least think of, like certain dietary triggers that may mimic the cells of the pancreas. And one example I can give you is that the A2 protein in milk, if you look at the amino acid structure of it, it closely mimics certain cells of the pancreas that produce insulin. So if you do have intestinal permeability or poor gut health, and this high milk consumption is leading to these molecules getting into the bloodstream unbroken down, then the immune system may attack those and anything that looks like it. And then all of a sudden you're left with a pancreas that doesn't really work properly. I did get a virus when I was in South America just a couple of months before I was diagnosed. So I'm trying to sort of piece this all together. And I was drinking a lot of milk because I was told at university that that's the ultimate post-workout drink for athletes. So I was guzzling that down. And, when I think about it, all the variables that I've read about, I've had experience with in the years leading up may have led to this, but it's got to be a storm of those kinds of variables.
Can you tell us a little bit? I know that how a type 1 diabetic takes care of themselves and a type 2 diabetic might be different, but for you, someone who has to inject insulin, can you tell us how many times a day do you do it and how do you know when?
Yes. So for the last 10 years, I've been using finger pricks to test my blood glucose. So what you need to do with diabetes is you've got two main things you're tracking every single day: blood glucose levels and insulin. And our job is to keep the blood glucose in a very tight range, which most bodies would do automatically, but we have to do it manually by using insulin to get glucose out of the blood into the cells, and by eating food to get glucose into the blood, just to keep it between those two levels. So I've been using finger pricks to check my blood glucose for the last 10 years, and I would do it 15 times a day. So basically the key moments of the day that I would do it is as soon as I wake up, I check what it is. Before and after every single meal, before, during, and after any workout or exercise that I do, straight before I go to bed, and any other time of the day that I feel like I want to know what my blood glucose is. Thankfully, technology has changed a lot, and it was available earlier, but I've only just had the courage to start using it. You can't see it now, but in the back of my arm, I've got a CGM, continuous glucose monitor. So this little beauty sends data to my phone through Bluetooth all day long, 24/7. So now I don't have to finger prick anymore. I can just pick up my phone and know exactly what my blood glucose is. And it tells you which direction you're trending in, if you're going up or down or slightly up, slightly down. It has alerts and alarms in case something goes wrong overnight or if you're dropping too fast. So it's really handy. Now, that's the glucose side of things. The insulin side of things is multiple daily injections is what I choose to use as my management strategy. Some people, like I said before, use a pump. The thing about a pump is you're attached to a device. So it's inserted under your skin. You've got a tube onto like a little computer sort of thing that you clip to your belt or sits in your pocket. That's on you all the time. You can take it off for like an hour or so, but essentially you're kind of connected to this thing. And psychologically for me, it was just a huge barrier. I can't imagine being attached to sort of that physical representation of a condition. So I choose the needles and basically every meal. So I have to inject insulin anytime I eat, assuming that I'm eating enough carbohydrates that'll impact my blood glucose. And also there's what's called a basal insulin. So there's two types of insulin. There's mealtime insulin or bolus, and then basal, which is sort of a background insulin. The basal insulin I take once a day. I actually take it at night. So over the day, it could be, some days 3 injections, some days 6, sometimes 8. It really depends on my lifestyle choices on that day.
And is that monitors? Was that inserted and is inside you from a surgical procedure?
No, you actually do it yourself. So every 10 days you change the sensor where it's positioned. You get a new one, and you do it yourself at home. It's quite an easy, like 2-step kit. It takes maybe 30 seconds, and it's incredible. You essentially feel like you are doing a little mini surgery every time. So with the CGM, there's a probe that sits in the skin. And so it is, somewhat of an invasive kind of technology in that there's this probe under your skin, but you can't really feel it. And even when it goes in, you barely feel a thing. So it's a really great device. And
you're used to pricking yourself anyway, several times a day.
Exactly. I mean, if you do the calculation, I think I did this recently. I think it's like 50,000 injections and over like 100,000 finger pricks over the last 10 years. So I'm used to it. It's second nature now.
Let's talk about exercise and diet and how it affects the diabetic, both type 1 and type 2. You are an exercise physiologist, and I read that you felt after your diagnosis, you got such relief because you pricked yourself after breakfast, and the reading was 25, and then you went for an hour workout and it went down to 5, and you thought to yourself, I can control this. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about how exercise features in helping diabetics, both type 1 and type 2, just be healthy.
Okay. Yeah. So the story you just told there it was amazing because that happened the day after my diagnosis, which was probably the best timing ever because I was so defeated after being diagnosed. But to then have this contrasting, empowering moment was huge for me. So I was sent home without insulin. This is the key in this story, is that I didn't have any insulin because they don't just give it to you straight away because it's so dangerous. If you overdose on insulin, you can kill yourself very easily. So they basically send you home and they say, just eat the meals you would usually eat, go to the gym, do what you do. Let's just collect data about your blood glucose. Then we can give you insulin to fix all the highs and issues that you're having. So first day after being diagnosed, no insulin, I eat breakfast and my blood glucose goes up to 25, which is totally expected without insulin when I'm not producing any. Mm-hmm. For me, that was crushing. Like I felt gross and it was, I felt heavy and lethargic, and it was just upsetting to see a number like that. And then after my workout, my blood glucose was normal. And I just didn't even know that was possible, to be honest. I had no idea that could happen. They didn't even tell me that. So I just couldn't believe that exercise had done that. And like I said, that gave me so much responsibility and empowerment and confidence to then take that with me for the rest of my life. So I wanted to know what happened. How did my blood glucose go from 5 times the normal range, 6 times the normal range to bang in the middle? And there's a mechanism that explains it really well, which happens in everyone, happens in all people with diabetes, type 1, type 2, insulin resistance, and irregular folk as well, which is that when you exercise, the body, when it contracts muscles, so any muscle contraction, it could be using your body weight, it could be doing cardio, jumping on a bike, lifting weights in the gym, you name it. Muscular contractions cause what's called non-insulin mediated glucose uptake, which basically just means that it opens these glucose gateways into the muscle cells. So usually the only way to get glucose into those muscles is for insulin to come along, put that key in the lock, unlock the gateway, and then glucose can enter. But with exercise, it cuts off the need for insulin and opens those gateways free of charge. Well, not totally free because there's a movement cost. You still got to do the workout, but you still do get this access through these gateways so glucose can enter. So essentially, you think of your body like sponges. Your muscles are like sponges. They are capable of soaking up glucose if you do the work, if you put in the exercise, if you grow those muscles and deplete the glycogen, glucose can enter. So that's what happened on that day. And also you get more insulin sensitivity from a workout. So it's this beautiful double sort of whammy where insulin works better and you don't even need as much of it because you've got this free sort of mechanism for it to enter. So it was just a great way for me to learn about that. Now that's for people with type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance. That's the goal. That's what you got to hold on to, because if your insulin isn't working and your doctor says, well, you just need more and more insulin in terms of injecting it or taking it exogenously outside of the body, well, you've got another option here that can work with that approach. So maybe you need less insulin from outside the body, still some, probably. You speak to your doctor, depends if your body's still producing insulin. So if you have type 2 diabetes or you have insulin resistance, or if you just want to improve your insulin sensitivity, you've now got this method of getting glucose into the cells by letting it in the gateways caused by exercise, and you improve your insulin sensitivity. So you can't just lose hope and say, well, I've got insulin resistance, my body can't tolerate glucose, I have to cut carbs out, or I have to go on a keto diet, or I will actually start doing exercise, see what happens, and you might find there's some solutions there that are pretty amazing.
Oh, great. Excellent. Because I want to talk now about diet. I'm reading this book called Sugar Nation that was written in 2010. And the author, and I've only read a few chapters, the author is just harping on the fact that you have to keep your sugar low. He doesn't mention fat at all he does mention being overweight, but he doesn't explain why overweight is, which you explained earlier, would be a problem with diabetes. But he doesn't talk about ingesting fat as also a way that can make you insulin resistant. Mm-hmm. And he just wants you to keep your sugar low, sugar low, sugar low. Now you've tried keto, low carb, paleo, and now you're on a plant-based diet. Can you tell us how you fared on each of these ways of eating and why they were good and not so good? Let's start with keto, because that's the one that I think people talk about. Keto being low carb, high fat, high protein, right? Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah, keto has taken over the diet wars conversation recently. It's just such a buzzword at the moment. You see keto on all food labels now. Like people just want to throw it on there because it's such a popular term. It's so funny because most people don't even really know if they're in ketosis. They just eat a keto mimicking diet, which is problematic for a number of reasons. But I decided to try a keto diet because I'd been low carb or fairly low carb for many, many years after being diagnosed and had some pretty good results. Like when you go on a paleo diet and your carbs are between, say, 50 to 100 grams a day, like you would think, it would reduce your need for insulin because it's a lower carb diet. You'll have less blood glucose fluctuations. It's maybe easier to control your diabetes. And I had some good results on that. And I thought, well, if I can drop my carbs even lower, maybe I'll have better results. So tried a keto diet, which is less than 50 grams of carbohydrates net per day, even less than 30, to be honest. And for the first little while, of course, the results were good. You do have these flatline blood glucose levels, and you do feel like it's really easy to manage diabetes.
And that's because you're not introducing sugar at all into your body, so your body doesn't even have to do it. So you're masking, you're not the symptoms.
That's right.
You're not dealing with the problem.
That's exactly right. You're masking the symptoms. And the symptoms are, in general, when you're insulin resistant or you don't produce enough insulin and you eat carbohydrates, the symptom of that is your blood glucose will elevate. So if you cut out the carbohydrates, your blood glucose will stay more stable. That's masking a symptom. Now, for the first 2 months, I had some good results on that diet. But over time, eating so much saturated fat through the diet every single day, every single meal, I began to need more insulin over time. So initially it worked. It had a little bit of weight loss as well, which another thing people must understand is that when you go on these diets and you do have a little bit of weight loss, that will improve your insulin sensitivity momentarily. But as soon as the weight comes back, you're going to pretty much see that go for the most part. So I was having these great results. Then I ran into this brick wall where I needed more and more insulin, especially the basal, the nighttime one, I was waking up with very high blood glucose level. So my fasting blood glucose levels were way outside of the normal range. So I was needing more insulin to try fix that overnight high that was happening. And that's what happens there is the liver pushes glucose out into the bloodstream to provide you with glucose overnight. And this happens in everyone. This is totally normal. But usually the insulin will then counter that to keep it in the range. But because I was resistant to the insulin or it just wasn't working as well, my liver wasn't getting that message to stop pushing glucose out. So I would wake up with high blood glucose. Then during the day, after certain meals, like after a workout, when I'm my most insulin sensitive, I could usually afford to have a little bit of carbohydrate. Like let's say I was having a big salad, the combination of all the ingredients would add up to 5 or 10 grams of carbohydrate, and that should be enough for me to easily metabolize. But when I was doing keto, that would spike my blood glucose, just a salad. And
this is because of the fat.
This is because there was so much saturated fat that my glucose tolerance was diminished. So the body knows what it's doing here. The body's pretty clever. It has what's called metabolic flexibility. Well, that's the goal. We want metabolic flexibility. You want to be able to eat carbohydrates and your body can metabolize it and deal with it. You want to eat some fat, the body can deal with it. When you're one extreme or the other, especially keto, you lose metabolic flexibility. So you become really good at using fat, right, as fuel, but very bad at tolerating glucose. And that's what happened. So I was such a bad glucose burner that any bit of glucose that entered my diet, like a bite of a banana, and I was spiking. So I lost glucose tolerance and it just wasn't worth it for me. I knew that I had to make a change because when you have diabetes, you actually want to be a really good carbohydrate burner. You don't want to be a good fat burner. You want to have both. You want to have metabolic flexibility. So I spent about 4 months on a keto diet, which I would say is long enough to know whether or not it worked. I mean, there's probably a lot of keto proponents out there who are like, you should have done it longer. You do it for 6 months, do it for a year. I couldn't. My diabetes.
When you say keto proponents, are those people who are specifically advocating it for diabetes?
Both. There's a lot. Yeah. There's people without diabetes who advocate, and then there's people with diabetes, and I think that I think the part of the picture that people are missing is the difference. And you alluded to it earlier, the difference between managing symptoms and actually addressing a root cause.
And I know on your Instagram, you wrote a post about the fact that if you can stay on a low carb diet, then more power to you for the rest of your life. But it is so difficult to do that, in the end, you can't mask the symptoms forever of low insulin tolerance, insulin resistance, and inability.
Glucose, the glucose intolerance, 100%. That is exactly what it is. So if you can do it forever, you may have some great results, and that's good. You may on keto, on paleo more because the fat is an issue, you're saying. Yeah. So it depends how you structure your diet. So the interesting thing is that saturated fat causes far more insulin resistance than polyunsaturated fat. So there is a way that you could probably do a healthier low carb / keto diet if you lean more on polyunsaturated fat, which improve insulin sensitivity, rather than doing the sort of the stuff you see online, like butter in your coffee and drinking coconut oil and, all the fattiest meats you can think of and lots of eggs. That sort of diet is not good for glucose tolerance. It just isn't. And there was an amazing study that actually came out, I think it was now last year. I don't know, all the years are mixing together since COVID happened. Kevin Hall did a study comparing a plant-based diet to a ketogenic diet. And it was incredible because he actually showed that when you eat a plant-based diet, sort of a lower fat plant-based diet, you improve your insulin sensitivity. Yet, even though your body produces a bit more insulin, the participants didn't get any fatter. So that's another myth, is that insulin makes you fat, so you've got to avoid carbs altogether. It's just not true. And these studies have shown it. So, the evidence is out there in the research. And if you are willing to experiment for yourself, you'll see this for yourself. But what's happening most of the time when people do keto is they're masking the symptoms and they're getting really good blood glucose in the absence of carbohydrate. But the real test of whether your diet's working is if you get really good blood glucose levels in the presence of carbohydrates. That's the difference. So if you go to the other end of the spectrum and you reduce your fats and add carbohydrates back in, and most of your fats are polyunsaturated fats, then you can eat carbohydrates and have great blood glucose control and insulin sensitivity. So you can, the tricky part is if you get somewhere stuck in the middle, that can be hard. So if you have quite a lot of fat and quite a lot of carbohydrate, then it might be a bit difficult for certain people. So I do think there's a place for extremes. I just think understanding which extreme you want to go to and how far you want to go will dictate your results. I think getting stuck in the standard American or standard Australian diet, right in the middle, both carbs and fats are high, you're asking for some problems.
Nothing's more frustrating than feeling like your body's working against you. Digestive troubles, skin issues, constant congestion, yet never knowing what's causing it. If any of that sounds familiar, it might be time for our gut health quiz. In just 3 minutes, you'll find out if dairy is behind your diarrhea, heartburn, constipation, bloating, acne, or even that never-ending mucus situation you got going on. Here's the good news. There is a solution. You do not have to keep living with these symptoms. Take the quiz, get answers, and start feeling like yourself again. So don't wait for your next dairy disaster to unfold. Take the gut quiz and share it with your friends. It just takes 3 minutes. It's a gut health quiz, and you can take it today at switchforgood.org/gut-health-quiz, which is really annoying to try to have to remember. So just go to the show notes to this podcast episode and click on the gut health quiz. Start feeling better today.
Why did you leave the paleo diet? I know you left the paleo to go to keto, but why didn't you go back to paleo? Why did you go to plants?
I guess I had played around on different parts of the spectrum, and the only one I hadn't done was the plant-based diet. And truth be told, I didn't think it would ever work. And I was very nervous to go on eat a vegan or plant-based diet. I thought I was going to lose all my muscle, and I just didn't appeal to me. I was a big meat eater. But there's a guy in Bondi who I'm now really good friends with called Simon Hill. He has the Plant Proof podcast. I think you've spoken to him on the show.
Yes, yeah. We have. Yes.
So he and I were sort of following each other on Instagram, and he just dropped a little seed in my DMs one day saying, "Hey, have you ever thought about a plant-based diet?" And I honestly hadn't. So, but I'm inquisitive, and having a science background, I know that if I can see evidence that something works, I will look into it. And I looked into it and I saw some evidence that was interesting. And I thought, you know what? It's the only thing I haven't tried yet. What if I can have better management? That's all I really care about. I just want better diabetes management. So he sort of nudged me in that direction. And then I just dived in straight away, head first, overnight, essentially went fully plant-based. And what I think makes this experiment so interesting is that I didn't go from standard Australian diet to plant-based. I went from keto, the opposite, the most opposite diet you could ever have, to a plant-based diet. So I got to see, how quickly things changed was just unbelievable. So I basically was able to undo all of that sort of metabolic damage that I'd caused on the keto diet. I regained insulin sensitivity very quickly. My insulin requirements started to come down very fast. I got down to a all-time low. The lowest insulin requirements that I'd had were on the keto for the first 2 months. I ended up matching that on a plant-based diet, which really said, and that's including a lot of carbohydrates. I was super happy about that. And the sort of terminology there is insulin to carbohydrate ratio. That's a number that everyone with diabetes should be aware of. How much does 1 unit of insulin impact your blood glucose levels, and how much carbohydrate can you eat for 1 unit of insulin? So on keto, it was like 1 to 3. So one unit would give me like 3 grams of carbohydrate. On a plant-based diet, 1 unit, I can eat 25 grams of carbohydrate. So huge difference.
That is a huge difference. Yeah. So you felt so much better as a diabetic. And what about as an athlete? Because that originally had been, you had been wary of the plant-based diet also because you're a very muscular, active man. So
for me, I actually surrendered to the fact that I was going to dwindle away, lose all my muscle, become a terrible athlete. That was actually what I thought. And I was like, you know what? I'm okay with that. I love the ethics of plant-based diet. I like the moral aspect. I know the diabetes management side of things is going to help. I'm okay if I become a little skeleton, right? And thankfully, the opposite happened, which was a really nice bonus and surprise. So I realized that when I was on this keto diet, low carb diet, it was really impacting me at my athletic endeavors that were power-based sports. And that's what I like to do. I like the strength and power, and I'm not an endurance athlete. So keto can be quite helpful for like very slow, like ultra marathon runners sometimes go on a keto diet because it's such a low intensity, sort of longer duration form of cardio. It can be fine for those people. But if they want to access higher power outputs and really like give it a sprint up a hill or hit those, high numbers, then they're in trouble because they've lost metabolic flexibility, as I mentioned before. They can't access glycogen as easily as somebody who's on a higher carbohydrate diet. So I sort of understood that, well, if I can eat more carbohydrates, it's actually going to help me in those kinds of sports where I like to do more power stuff and strength and body weight and calisthenics and all those kinds of things. So I noticed so quickly that I started to like sort of fill out again, and I gained some muscle, and I'm loving my training. And it's been 3 years now, and my insulin requirements are still the same. They didn't bounce back. It wasn't like the keto experiment where 2 months in I ran into these hurdles. It's just been a breeze. And I don't want to make it sound too easy because I'm obviously disciplined enough to keep everything in line, but it has been pretty easy in certain ways. Like I just have these principles I stick to. My training feels amazing. I'm performing better than ever. I've gained significant amount of muscle. My body composition's changed a lot too. I cannot think of a single reason to stop ever. So at this stage, I'm all in.
You're an environmentalist too, so that's an added bonus, not only alongside your love of animals. Can you share us then your food philosophy and what some of the meals that you eat on a daily basis?
Sure, yeah. So I do stick to whole foods 99+% of the time. Like I'm pretty strict with that. For me, that is basically the non-negotiable, is that the foundation, the pillars have to be whole foods, because you can do a pretty junky plant-based diet, especially these days. Like companies are coming out with some pretty amazing products that taste just like the real thing. And they're not healthy and they're not claiming to be healthy, but they're very convenient. And it's easy to sort of fall into that path of going, you know what, I'll just add those in every other day. My rule is no, those are treats and they've got to be pretty rare. So it's a whole food diet. I basically eat when I'm hungry. I stop when I'm full. I don't really care if it's 2 meals a day or 4 meals a day, as long as it's whole foods. That sort of diet will allow you to very naturally regulate your appetite. It's so hard to overeat. I think like maintaining a healthy body weight on a plant-based diet, if it's made from whole foods, pretty easy to do. It's the usual, fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds. I do take a protein powder after my workouts. I don't consider that to be like a unhealthy processed food. Some people do. Some people are very militant about even powders, but I think it's just a great tool to add into if you're an athlete and you need to hit some protein requirements and you're plant-based and you find it hard to eat the protein, because obviously plant-based proteins come with fiber, unlike animal protein, which doesn't. So it can be a bit difficult on the digestive system. So I have my protein shake, which I do in the form of like a smoothie bowl. I do like to fast actually quite a bit, just because I'm not hungry in the morning. So often I'll just eat around midday. And then I've got like an 8-hour window to eat in where I can eat sort of whatever I want and fill up and love my food. I love cooking at home, and I do focus on protein because of the amount of sort of muscle breakdown activity that I do. And it's not a huge amount. Like I'm not eating crazy amounts, but I do eat about 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, or sometimes 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. But then other days even less. So, I'm not obsessed with those kinds of numbers.
How many grams, since we're here in the United States, although we have listeners all over the world, how many grams do you take about a day?
Yeah. So in the other metric, it'll be a gram of protein per pound of body weight. So I actually I'm less than that now that I think about it. I actually take less than that because I'm 85 kilos, which is like 183 pounds, and I only eat 150 grams of protein a day. So I'm under that amount. And I think that I think that people do get a little bit too focused on protein and probably overdo it. You don't actually need that much. You'd be surprised how little you need to maintain your body and your physique, especially if you're not doing huge amounts of resistance training. So, and then carbohydrate wise, there's almost no ceiling. I just fill up my bowls. I make them as colorful as possible, and whatever the carbohydrates are is what I go with. And I give the insulin that I need to eat those meals. I'm not worried about the insulin. If it's a couple of units higher than it would have been if I removed, say, the sweet potato, that's fine with me, because I know that my insulin sensitivity is good. I can tolerate the glucose. Yeah, so the glucose and carbohydrate that I'm eating, I know it's going to fuel a good workout, which then allows me to be more insulin sensitive. So it's this beautiful positive feedback loop. And yeah, I mean, I've been doing it for 3 years, and I can see myself doing it for a lifetime at this stage.
And do you pay attention to fat?
Yes, I do. I absolutely do. I try to get, the thing with the fat intake is, this is where it can get really tricky. If you're very disciplined and you can get your total fat intake to around 10%, that's a low fat diet, 10% of total calories, you will see incredible glucose control. I find it hard to get it down to 10% because I actually really enjoy my higher fat, polyunsaturated fat plant foods. Like, I really like nuts and avocado and olive oil. And so unless I remove a lot of those, I just can't get down to that low. So I sit at about 15 to 20% of my calories are from fat, but I ensure that the saturated fat is very low. That's the one sort of metric that I'm keeping an eye on, because I know the relationship between saturated fat and insulin resistance, and I don't want to go down that path. So as long as it's polyunsaturated fat, I could probably go up to 25% or even 30%. So I'm not too worried about that. I just make sure it's not saturated fat as much as possible. Can
you share with us a meal, just one meal that you really like, that so folks can get inspired to maybe make it themselves? Absolutely. I'll share 2 quick ones. So great. So for breakfast, which for me is a later breakfast because I fast till about midday, I in summer I'll do like an overnight oats. So half a cup of oats soaked in we have this really cool almond milk that's actually got, I think it's like a pea protein in it. So it's a high protein almond milk, and it's fortified. It's got calcium, vitamin D, all that kind of stuff. So I soak it in that overnight. I chop up maybe a date, sprinkle of some walnuts, chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax meal, maybe half a banana. And after my workout, that's my sort of go-to. So it's a bowl of oats with some fruit. In winter, I'll just make a porridge, a hot version of that. And then for lunch, it's basically like a giant Buddha bowl. So I just try to make it as rainbow as possible. So the base is like leafy greens. Then I'll have some kind of whole grain, maybe quinoa or brown rice, legumes. So it could be tempeh or chickpeas. Then some cruciferous vegetables. So broccolini, maybe some like sauteed mushrooms. Again, a sprinkle of maybe some hemp seeds. And that's pretty much those are the kinds of things. I mean, it's hard to understand what it looks like. It's actually quite a huge serving of food, and it really fills you up. I think we can see it on your Instagram somewhere. Yeah, there's a couple of photos in there. Yeah. Great. Well, now let's go from food to fasting. I did want to ask you, I thought you had just fasted when you were on the keto diet. You were doing intermittent fasting. I didn't realize you were still doing it. Tell us what benefits it gives you, especially a type 1 or type 2 diabetic, or actually also any of our audience, because that is a big question nowadays. Yeah. It's about as trendy as keto. I don't want to diminish it by saying trendy, but it is. No, you're right. Everywhere. You're right. I think it's been overhyped for sure. The reason I do it is because practically it works well for my diabetes management, because the more insulin I have on board, meaning the more times or the larger the dose of insulin that's in my system, the more dangerous it is for me to exercise. So the reason I fast in the morning is because that's when I do most of my activity, and I don't want to be doing my activity with insulin on board. I want to be able to go to the gym and not worry about having this crashing low and then have to be like guzzling down glucose and lollies in the middle of a workout. It's not practical. So what I prefer to do is I have a coffee in the morning, which then I feel ready to sort of train. I do my workout. I have my swim. I take the dog out. I do all the things that are really active. And then when I know that I'm going to be sort of less active as the day goes on, then I start to eat and I can inject my insulin. So it's more of a practical thing. I think there is benefit in fasting for people who
might want to reduce their meal frequency because they feel like they're overeating a lot. And if you set up a framework where your eating window is 6 to 8 hours, it is quite hard to overeat in 6 to 8 hours, assuming you do have the willpower and discipline to stop at the 8-hour mark. This is the problem. Some people fast until midday and then they eat until midnight. If anything, you'd want to front load your calories, not back load your calories. So when you look at the research around time restricted eating the majority of your calories earlier on in the day actually leads to better health outcomes and weight loss than backloading your calories and eating them all before bed. So for people who really do want to fast, you could try fasting later in the day. So maybe you could eat your breakfast at 10 o'clock, have an 8-hour window or a 10-hour window if you want, and then you can sort of fast up until before bed. You may even sleep better doing that way as well. I do think that fasting has its place. I don't think everyone has to do it. I don't think anyone has to do it. Achieving a calorie deficit in any way possible will give you great health outcomes. It doesn't have to be fasting, but if that's a tool that people want to use, then that's fine. I just think don't be so militant about it that you can never have a day off. Do you know what I mean? Like some people are so obsessed with fasting that they think they have to every day. Some days it's okay to break the fast a little bit earlier, maybe an hour or two earlier, or maybe to have a day off. Don't fast for a day and just
go
use
to dinner with your friends.
Enjoy your life, enjoy your meals. So I think just finding some balance there is good. A lot of studies have shown that this sort of 15 kilogram or 35 odd pounds is sort of a threshold of weight loss that allows people to regain some insulin sensitivity and reverse insulin resistance. And some people go into remission of type 2 diabetes. So if fasting can allow you to strip some weight off quickly because you're reducing your meal frequency, and you can see a reduction in weight that leads to these better outcomes for diabetes, that might be the best motivator of all. So whilst I'm a huge proponent of sort of slow and steady wins the race, you just want slow and steady weight loss, achieve a lifestyle that you can sort of sustain forever, there is a case for a more sort of quick, rapid sort of weight loss, just to give the individual the motivation to see the results very quickly and then go, okay, my diabetes is actually improving. I've lost a lot of weight. Now I feel like I'm in a position where I can add on. Now I can start training different and change my diet. And so it could just be this great catalyzing tool to just get the ball rolling. So yeah, I think fasting, I'm on the fence. I think it's great for some, great for others, not so good for others. And, everyone just figure it out for themselves. I think that's the best way to go about it.
I agree. You have something called the 5 pillars of health. Tell us what those are.
So the 5 pillars are basically what I discovered were the best ways for me to sort of manage my diabetes, but also just be really happy and healthy over time since being diagnosed. Because when I was diagnosed, I was convinced there was a death sentence, life was over. And I had a great moment the day after my diagnosis where I was like, okay, exercise is powerful. So that became the first pillar that I discovered. And then it was just this sequence of experimenting over time and figuring out, hey, well, there's actually more than one pillar, which is great, that really impacts diabetes. So exercise is one, of course, nutrition, which we've spoken about with all those experiments, those self-experiments. Daily living. This one was interesting because this is the pillar that most people overlook the importance of. But until you have diabetes and you start to see these objective numbers and have this feedback, you don't realize how important these little daily things are. So I call them the 6 S's. Sleep, which obviously I don't want to, you can't overhype sleep. It's so important. Sun, getting a daily dose of sunlight every day. We know the vitamin D levels are super important for diabetes. Steps. So obviously keeping active, keeping on our feet. Again, we know that, and the studies are clear, walking flattens the curve of glucose elevation if you walk after a meal, especially a carbohydrate containing meal. So people with type 2, type 1, a post-meal walk is just an amazing way to keep that tighter range.
Yeah. I remember you said that you used to think walking was not a thing you did, and now you find it very valuable.
Like when I was younger, I just thought, why would you go for a walk if you can just run? Like, just go for a run. I thought it was so silly, but I didn't understand it. I was very ignorant. I thought it was just for like old people who just didn't care. It was so silly. So I love walking.
What are the benefits as opposed to running of walking for you?
Yeah. So walking, it's all about the intensity and the effect on your heart rate. So higher heart rate activities don't reduce your blood glucose as well as lower intensity activities like walking. So if you compare, say, a HIIT sprint training up a hill compared to a long, slow walk, you're going to actually get way better blood glucose management with the walk than you would with the HIIT training. And it's all about the energy systems that your body uses. So I understood that it was just a great tool to use in certain situations, because you don't want to run up a bloody hill every day, right? But you can easily walk every day. So it's easy to use. It's right there for you. You can socialize while you do it. You can take your dog. You can see the world. It's nice. It's a nice way to do it. And there's no wear and tear on the body. You can walk for hours without worrying. So yeah, walking's something that I do every day now. And obviously having a dog helps. So if people want to get a dog, I recommend that. The next S is stress management. So stress can really influence your blood glucose on a minute to minute, day by day scale. So I noticed that if I had a stressful moment, even just an acute stressor, like if I was surfing in big waves or if someone cut me off in traffic, my blood glucose would go up. So I knew that I had to find techniques to sort of keep that in check. So like breathing techniques and understanding maybe there's stresses in my life that I need to get rid of. And I don't surf in big waves as much anymore. It just to me, it's not worth it for what it does to my blood glucose. What am I up to? Sleep, sun, stress, steps, smile, a big one. And I know it sounds silly, but it's like the idea of this one is to fill your life with things and people that actually make you feel good and feel happy. I think sometimes we get so caught up in, punishing ourselves in our workouts, punishing ourselves with what we eat or what we don't eat. And I just think we need to sort of let it off a little bit and sort of find some time to enjoy ourselves. And then, so the other pillars of my sort of healthy lifestyle, and then mindfulness is huge. And essentially mindfulness to me is just, it bridges the gap between what we know we should do and so like knowing and action. So what is the act we should be doing? We should be working out. We should be doing this. So we know we should do it, but how do we get ourselves to do it? And that's the mindfulness. That's the connector. It's understanding the why behind why we do these things, not just what we should do. And then the last pillar is it just all funnels into the last pillar. It's sort of a byproduct of all the others, which is control, blood glucose control and insulin sensitivity. And those pillars will set you up for great diabetes management, assuming you can do them for a long enough period of time.
Those are all very good for everybody, even if you have diabetes or not, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that's why I say diabetes is like my lens into a healthy lifestyle. I think it's not groundbreaking what I just said, but I figured it out through my diabetes, having that firsthand experience, seeing these numbers every day of blood glucose and insulin and the effects of those factors.
Are there any diabetes myths that you want to debunk on this show for people the assumptions that people make about diabetics or diabetes?
There are so many. I will choose a couple to tackle in this conversation. One of them is less of a myth that I don't think it's like malicious, but people don't understand just through lack of education, is that type 1 diabetes is not caused by eating sugar as a child. And I think that I don't care if people say that to me, I don't get offended, but I know a lot of people in the diabetes community do get offended. They feel like people are pointing the finger at them and saying, well, you caused this. You must have eaten a lot of candy as a kid or a lot of sweets and a lot of chocolate and junk food. It's just not true. We spoke about earlier the pathogenesis and the mechanisms of how
it's an autoimmune disease. Yeah,
exactly. So it's autoimmune. It's just like any other autoimmune disease. You can't just say it's because of the diet, right? So, but
what about type 2 diabetes? That is not caused either by sugar, too much sugar.
No, that's a really good point. So again, people point the finger at sugar for causing type 2 diabetes. No one, except for people who are sort of aware of this, understand that fat plays a huge role in that too, right? So especially if you're on a sort of a high fat and high sugar diet, well, then it's this storm of both of them that can cause it. So type 2 is more so actually an excess of calories. And the easy way to get a lot of calories is sugar, because it tastes great, fat, because it also, when you combine it with sugar, tastes great. So you're just eating too much food in general. So I think that, if you ate a almost fully carbohydrate-based diet, but you were in a calorie deficit and you were able to maintain a healthy body weight, you don't have to worry about type 2 diabetes, right? So that's a good one too. Other myths to think about. Well, obviously we touched on the keto one. So keto doesn't cure type 2 diabetes. Keto does not cure type 2 diabetes. People need to understand this.
I read when I was researching you, I actually read a blog where someone said keto will reverse type 2 diabetes. And we know that that's not true.
No, keto will manage the symptoms.
Right.
And maybe not long term, unless you can stick to it long term. So yes, keto can manage symptoms. It can improve markers of diabetes management. Doesn't cure it, because the underlying cause, which we spoke about, is this insulin resistance. And ketogenic diets do not improve insulin resistance.
And they can make it worse, like you said, because of the excess fat. So
that's right.
Even if you can stick to it, you'd be better off on a paleo diet, which is a lot of whole foods, even though it has a low carb, higher protein. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you really want to do a keto diet to manage the symptoms, try do a polyunsaturated fat keto diet. Don't be drinking butter and coconut oil at every coffee you have 5 times a day. I just don't think that's healthy. I think everyone will agree that bacon and eggs is not a health food, even though it can manage blood glucose levels. I just don't see it as a health food for like long-term health. Other myths, I don't know. I think those are probably the ones that come to mind for now.
You swim most every morning, no matter how cold it is. Are you a follower of Wim Hof, or what are the reasons that you swim in cold water?
I am a follower of Wim Hof, and I still remember the day he followed me on Instagram, and I screenshot it.
Tell our audience who Wim Hof is and why you follow him.
Wim Hof, he's a character. Wim Hof essentially developed this. Is he Swiss? I think he's Swiss. He developed a breathing technique that he uses in very, very cold exposures. So whether he's in an ice bath Wim Hof goes trekking in just his underwear in the snow for like hours at a time. Like, this guy is figured out a technique of breathing that essentially sort of hacks or biohacks his physiology so that his heart rate is in an optimal place so that he can tolerate pain and cold. And I fell in love with ocean swimming a very long time ago. I'd say I've been swimming every day for literally 10 years. I have not missed a day. But I was in New Zealand swimming in kind of like a glacial area in like an icy lake. And I did a little bit of a Wim Hof breathing before I went in. The Wim Hof breathing sort of allows you to then tolerate the cold. You can go in, you get your cold exposure. And I was in New Zealand swimming in the lake, and I tagged Wim Hof for fun on Instagram. I didn't think he'd see it, and he followed me back. Had to screenshot it. Very happy about that. But yeah, I've been swimming every day for 10 years. I can't get enough of it. I think that what does
Wim say the advantage of cold does, and what does it do for you? I swim a lot also. I do not like the cold.
Oh, really?
But after doing research on you, I said to my husband, maybe we should go swimming in the ocean, because actually the Pacific, unbeknownst to a lot of people, right off California, is colder than the Atlantic. And so it can get very cold during our winter. Oh yeah. I've been surfing in that area, and you need a thick wetsuit for the winter. It's cold. Yeah. So the benefits, firstly, psychologically, you just feel absolutely incredible. When you can put yourself through a task that is difficult, and the only person stopping you is you, and the only person getting you in there is you, it's extra hard. And if you can do that and then come out the other side, you feel like you've really achieved something. It's the same as a hard workout. Like, to put yourself through a hard workout, if you get butterflies before a workout that you are putting yourself through, and there's no like coach or trainer making you do it, it tells you something about yourself. So I like the feeling of finishing a cold swim and coming out and going, I did that. I achieved that. There's sort of immune benefits that Wim Hof talks about, your immune system. There's activating different types of fat in the body. So apparently, I haven't looked into this in depth, but it stimulates brown fat, and there's the healthier types of fat compared to white fat and other things. So I think for me, though, it is more of a routine of improving my mindset, feeling like I've accomplished something, and then taking that mood with me just for the rest of the day. And you know what? If I have a bad moment in the day for whatever reason, I go down to the ocean and just dip in, come out, and it's like I start again. So it's like a refresher, a complete refresher for me. Beautiful. Tell us about your dog, Dennis. Oh, I was waiting for you to say this. I'm entranced with him because I saw a video where y'all are going somewhere and he is singing or muttering, or just he's making these sounds that made me laugh. He's a funny dog. He's so strange. So Dennis is
a rescue dog. I got him when he was 7 years old. He's now 13.
Not only did you rescue an older dog, which are very hard to rescue, but can be so rewarding because they know you rescued them. Also, you rescued a black dog, which at least in the United States, it's hard to adopt a black dog. There are innate prejudices against, especially big black dogs like Dennis.
That's interesting you say that. That is actually something that I didn't know was a thing. I didn't understand there was this sort of prejudice towards the look of a specific dog, not just the breed, but the color of its fur. So I rescued him when he was 7, which was actually kind of hard for me to do because it's an older dog, you want more years with the dog. But it was the best thing I ever did. So the way it happened was I was actually doing a photo shoot for this sort of charity where they were putting together a calendar of like trainers with dogs. So there was like personal trainers, coaches, exercise physiologists, and everyone was like posing with the dog, and everyone had a month in this calendar. And I met Dennis on that day, and he was just an interesting dog. He was jumping up and down really, really high in the cage. All the other dogs were barking, and he wasn't barking. He was just jumping. I didn't realize he'd lost his voice from obviously barking too much in the month. He'd been there for a few months, so he couldn't bark. So he was just jumping. Anyway, I took out a few dogs on a walk just to see how they would respond on the lead and just give them some freedom out of the cage for a little bit. There's a park nearby. All the other dogs are like tugging on the lead and like dragging you down the car park to get to this area to try escape. When I took Dennis out of his cage, he wasn't pulling on the lead. He was walking right next to me and the lead was loose. So I was like, wow, this dog's different. So I took him to this park and I just ran a couple of laps with him just to get some exercise. And then I sat down on the grass and he fell asleep like on my lap. And I was like, oh my, this is great. Like all the other dogs are just going crazy. If you guys want to go on YouTube and have a look, our whole rescue story has been documented by the dodo. It's a long story. I'll save it for that video. But essentially I rescued Dennis and only a few days later I discovered that he had a voice, meaning he tries to communicate like a person would. He tries to talk. So for me, that was just such a pleasant surprise to see that he likes to kind of sing and talk, and he's just a funny, charismatic dog. But the video you saw is the one where I take him to the beach. And when I say that word, he just erupts. He's so excited to go to the beach. And then when we're in the car, he knows the way. And as I take that turn, he's just singing and talking. So it's such a feel-good video online, that dodo video. And I'm so blessed that they made it, allowed us to make that video for them. That was really fun.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love it because there's so many pictures of him with you and your partner and Dennis, like a family, and you all look so happy and healthy. The two of you, by the way, have more abs than anybody in my whole friends circle. So y'all have to go look at Drew's Instagram.
Carly, people say that about Carly all the time. And it's funny because she's been plant-based for 3 years as well. But for her to maintain a set of abs is effortless. She actually, to be honest, she's gifted in many ways, but the diet helps for sure. It's an easy way to keep the calories down with eating a lot of healthy food. So I think that's a big part of it.
Well, tell her I covet her abs. Share with us your singing and songwriting, because you, after college, university, you were in a band and you have released a single or two singles actually, and I have a couple more coming out.
Yeah, I always wanted to be a singer-songwriter or a musician. I then got diabetes, which obviously threw a spanner in the works, and it also made me realize how kind of unhealthy the lifestyle is of a musician, being on the road, traveling all the time. Most of your gigs are in alcoholic venues where you're in bars and pubs and clubs. And I sort of made a decision that it wasn't going to be something I pursued as a career, but rather just a fun sort of passion project. So I didn't let go of it altogether, but I recorded a couple of songs. I released a couple of songs on Spotify. I've got another one coming soon. It's kind of sad in a way that, like, when I think back, I think, like, imagine if I gave it a real good shot. But I think it was a trade-off that was worth it, because I'm so happy with the life I live now. And I think it would have been very different if I'd chosen that path. I have friends who we played gigs together who are now doing quite well in that sort of universal global music world. And it's a different life. It's a different life, and I'm happy with where I'm at. And I still always play music. I've got a guitar, got 2 guitars in this room right now, and I'll take them outside later. But yeah, it's a passion project. So for now, it's just going to be a couple of singles on Spotify, and that's about it.
Well, you have a beautiful voice, and so people should check you out on Spotify for sure. So how can people find you and learn more about how to cope with diabetes and also be inspired by your way of living?
So my main channel that I'm, I guess, most active on is on Instagram. And my dog has an Instagram too, if you want to check him out.
I will, since I'm in love with your dog. Okay.
He's just funny. You'll get a lot of laughter. And I think at a time like where the world is in some ways falling apart, we need a bit of laughter every day. So if you want to check him out, that'll help put a smile on your face every day. But yeah, Instagram most active. I do have a website as well, which I post some articles on. And I used to do some consulting online, which I've now actually stopped doing for the moment. Just I've got a few other projects I'm working on, but I'm sure one day I'll have something there. But I've just worked on an ebook, which is going to be launching very, very soon. And that is essentially my 5-pillar approach in one like blueprint. So I think that'll be handy for people with diabetes. But yeah, Instagram and my website are the main places for now.
And is that Drew's Daily Dose?
Yes, at drews.daily.dose.
And what about Dennis's Instagram? How do you find him?
You'll find him easily. His is a daily dose of Dennis.
Okay, that's great. Drew, thank you so much for being on the show. I've learned so much and really enjoyed speaking with you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. That was such a nice conversation. And you clearly do your research because you touched on almost every topic that you spoke about in the intro there. So well done. That was awesome.
Well, I also had more questions for you, but that we will have to save later. When you want to publicize something, you just let us know. We would love to have you back on the show.
I'd love to do a round 2. Hopefully we can do that soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.